States. The 1848 Illinois-Mission Canal made Chicago a boomtown, 1 million people here by 1890. But 1 million people and being hog butchered to the world, as the poet Carl Sandburg named this. Everyone used the river as a sewer, that polluted the lake. 12% of Chicago. That's a rough estimate, but a lot of people died of typhoid, cholera epidemics. So to stop the river from polluting the lake, the towers topping out at 1,192 feet. That's going to be the third tallest building in Chicago. And Genie Gang, company studio gang, when it's completed, that will be the third tallest. It'll be the third tallest building in Chicago, but the tallest building in the world by a woman-led architectural firm. And you know what? Well, the function for Genie was to make sure that every single floor had a unique view of Chicago. So she worked with her assistants from the inside. She picks up the balcony, she moves it 2 feet right or left, you still had a great view. Very intriguing building on the right with an almost mosque-like Moorish yellow onion skin dome. That's the Hotel Intercontinental. Began its life in 1930 as the Medina Athletic Club, a project of the philanthropic group who call themselves the Sons of the East, the Medina Shriners. Now look at that dome and just imagine back in the 30s they wanted to use it as a landing pad for airship. A place of modern architecture. Did you ever hear of the Bauhaus? The Bauhaus was a really famous art compound in 1920s Germany, merging industry and art. The third director of the Bauhaus, Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, came to Chicago in 1938 and as director of the Illinois Institute of Technology here would spread the modern and minimal style around the globe. Now to get an idea of Mies van der Rohe and the modernists, we can look at the Fidelity Building. Mies van der Rohe, director of IIT, Illinois Institute of Technology here, father of America. If I put decorations on that building, a modernist would say I was being bourgeois, superfluous, dishonest, and wouldn't want to have lunch. London can have Big Ben, Paris its Eiffel Tower. I'm a Chicago, and I'll take the clock tower of the one and only Wrigley Building, 1921, North Face added 1924. Commissioned by chewing gum king William Wrigley Jr., who was selling juicy fruit gum at the Columbian Exposition. He brought the fair home. The Spanish Renaissance, modeled on the 11th century Giralda Tower in Seville in Spain. We approach our Grand Boulevard, Michigan Avenue. We fondly call it in the French trading empire right there in 1779. Folks, a little photo etiquette. Please feel free to move all about the boat to take photos, but we do ask that you not stand in the same place continuously because people might be sitting down behind you, just so everyone can still see the tour. And looming on the right was Spire, Adrian Smith, 2009, Skidmore, Owings & Merrill, the urban habitat. And the council recognizes spires as an organic element of design. You would measure that. Now here's a Chicago trick. Make sure you have an entrance on the river and you can pull the measuring tape from the street level down to the water. You get a few extra feet there. Those additions take the Trump building up to 1,362 feet. The World's Fair influence again on our happy squirrel. You feel safe and secure. Security is an issue. This is Prohibition years. Alcohol was illegal, but Chicago was never dry. You could have a drink during Prohibition at a speakeasy, an illegal tavern. There may have been one below the dome. The black box on the right is Ludwig Mies van der Rohe's final American commission, AMA Plaza. Mies is known for saying less is more. Modernism again is a minimalist approach. I'm going to simplify modernism. Restaurants, a bowling alley, a swimming pool, a bank, office space, and your living space upstairs. What the river was like in the early 1960s here. No fancy little taverns or anything, no river walk, it was all industrial. So Bertrand put everything you could think of right at your fingertips at home. Glass box on your right, the Heinz Building by Bruce Graham, Skidmore, Owings & Merrill, 1987, indicative of international style. The international style modernists had arrived at the viewpoint. The future moves too fast. We cannot determine what business 1913 is actually thriving today as it's been reimagined into the headquarters for Encyclopedia Britannica and River Roast, an industrial-sized restaurant. Now with the Prairie School of Architecture. Prairie School architects evoke our flat Midwestern landscape, designs horizon-hugging, balanced by the clock tower. Note the building is asymmetrical. Count the bays. 5 arches on the right, there's only 4 on the left. The from LaSalle Street Bridge, they de-widened the building, they just lopped off 20 feet. And I made up the word de-widen just for my tour. It is not really a word, you cannot use it in Scrabble. A simple 1912 Chicago School coffee warehouse affords us a look at an early Chicago School skyscraper. 3 elements right here still in the building arts today. First and foremost, you notice it's supported with a skeletal internal frame. You know what that led to? Number two, now light. Light can get into the building. And big windows like that were even sounds. Watertight box-like structures filled with concrete, and you better drill. You better go down about 65 feet. You got to get through that softer stuff until something solid like hardpan, oxidized clay. You know when they use the old wood pilings? I love the old phrase, when they would pound the pilings down, they pounded them down, they called it the right of refusal, when they refused. And architects would make your doorstop 3 feet in the air, because over time it would eventually sink a little bit. And on our right, one of the grandest examples of Art Deco, that streamlined style beginning with the Paris exhibition of 1925. This is the Chicago Merchandise Mart, 1930, the largest structure in America. Now, fortunately, Joseph P. Kennedy, the father of our late president and senators, picked it up, walked inside, found he had 96 acres of floor space, and attracted the furniture design trade, who have showrooms throughout to the industry today. Ladies and gentlemen, look around you. Welcome to the beginning of Chicago. This is Wolf Point. This is where everything first began. It is the confluence of the three branches of the Chicago River. Sauganash, described as a barracks with a pig wallow for a street. Sauganash is Native American. That's Potawatomi for English-speaking Canadian. But it was not the English place of wild onions become Chicago, the city forevermore. We're going to tour a bit of the North Branch now, and as we do, look around you. We're in the midst of a residential renaissance. Did you know this is still a working industrial river? And you'll find barges carrying slag, gravel, sand. Antonio, Texas, because it was San Antonio's Riverwalk in the 1980s that inspired Chicago to do the same. We looked at it and said, you know, that's what Daniel Byrne for the newspapers right up in the 1990s. Now it's fixed in place a piece of urban art. They raise and lower it once a year, run a car across it so they can call it active. The rest of the time, it's just up there scaring the people living over here at Fulton House, Harry Weiss, 1981. This is probably the oldest building on the river, built in 8. Well, somebody just moved out, first time since they were built. The third one sold for $2.3 million. Now, Harry Weiss himself, Harry was talking about living here. His friends were like, Harry, are you goofy? Nobody wants to live on that dirty little river. Harry saw the potential of the river, the original source, the blue, the azul. And if you don't have an ocean, there are always days when the river is enough. I leave you with that thought. Let's take a little break. We'll turn the boat around here. I'll join you when we're heading south. Have any questions so far? I'll be walking around and take questions off mic. Thanks.
How long are these tours? An hour?
75 minutes.
That's
That's an hour and 15 minutes for you.
Well, hopefully I dry out.
You'll dry out, dear.
It's not like you got somewhere to go.
Here's the deal. In the 1800s, Chicago gave the railroads all this prime riverfront land, making us the railroad hub of America. You couldn't take one train from New York to California. You had to change trains in Chicago. And when you got off a train in Chicago, I think it was magic. You could feel your wallet get lighter before you even took it out of your pockets. You get breakfast, lunch, a hotel. So air rights is self-explanatory. You have the right to buy air from the railroad, but you must stay out of their way. That's why the next building looks like an inverted pyramid, although we've already nicknamed it either the Tuning Fork or the Generous Martini, 150 North Riverside. This site was vacant for 60 years. No one knew what to do with it because you have the railroad tracks on the west, the river on the east, and 2 acres. That's a tiny footprint for a skyscraper. But a very innovative, they only use 25% of the base, and then they cantilever in the top 8 floors on either side. That keeps you out of the way of the trains. And look here, can you get this photo? You can see your own reflection right there. Okay, let's talk a little support and construction, my friends. If you're going to cut away your outer support walls, what's actually holding this building up? They're working on the same principle I've been getting back to with my yoga and Pilates, a strong central core. Because chronologically, you're looking at the 1960s pure modernism. That's 1 and 2, 65 and 68. As you go into the 70s, you see the white building? That's a prime example of that international style. And the idea was no historic precedent, one building on our left. 1928, I think of this building as a perfect marriage of pragmatism and art. Start with an opera house, surround yourself with corporate towers though, you always still have revenue coming in. Why does it say Civic Opera Building with a V instead of hobo capital of America when everybody used to hop the freight trains here to build this country? Madison Street was the main stem known around the world as Hobohemia. Hobos, tramps, artists, and wobblies, the industrial workers of the world fighting for that one big union founded here in 1905. Those tramps got an education at their own college. Dr. Ben Reitman's Hobo College on West Madison Street. You'd ride old Dirty Face into town. Playground for people who think they've been meeting now for 60 years. If you ever want, you can go to one of their public lectures on a Saturday night, and after the main speaker, the rebuttal period, you yourself can take the speaker's platform for 3 minutes. You can say whatever's on your mind. Just remember to honor the Hobo College motto. Hey, it's right above your head. It's Adams and Jackson Street. Now, if you visit the Art Institute on Michigan Avenue, check the corner of Adams and Jackson, and you may still find like a historic beginning of Route 66 roadside. Take a selfie and hashtag it to us at Shoreline Boat Tours. There's the Shoreline water taxi. Come back over here, we'll drop you off, and then you can walk right over to the second tallest building. Chicago is a city of neighborhoods, my friends. Now, the neighborhoods, I gotta be honest, I don't know a single Chicagoan who ever really got used to the name change. 99% of the time, ask a Chicagoan what's your tallest building, we still say Sears Tower. We'll turn the boat around for a better photo op. I'll discuss it in much more detail. But, you know, as opposed to the more common tube and throat singing technique of or frog style tubing. Movie fans on the right, it's Art Deco in style. This is the former Chicago Central Post Office. Who saw the Batman movie, The Dark Knight? Remember when the Joker was robbing the bank, the Gotham City Bank? That was right here. That was shot right inside the old post office. Why did we need dollars by 601 West Coast? I did a little homework. See, I've watched developers come and go for 25 years. Nothing ever panned out. And 601 West gets it. So I do a little research. I find out this company that got it, they had a big hand. They developed the entire west side of Manhattan in New York City. I said, all right, this is a company with a track record. So I dig a little deeper. I found out they already own the Civic Opera building. I said, that's cool. They have an interest in Chicago. They're not going to cut and run. And when they secured Walgreens Corporate as their anchor tenant, got Ferrara Chocolate to move in, and now 3,000 employees of Home Chef. I knew the building before email, even before text messaging. Once upon a time, business was the art of the handshake. You would meet your customer not Facebook to Facebook, but face to face. I used to put two people in one room and have them talk to each other. OMG, imagine that sin. So you see, we couldn't sprawl out. Hours Bertrand Goldberg, can you see that? Goldberg was the modernist, but he thought outside the box, pun intended. So when his teacher, Mies van der and his peers are doing all those glass boxes in the 1960s, he rebels. And he writes in his journal, I rebel against the century of static. I rebel against the straight line. I refuse to remake humanity in the image of a machine. Now he said River City came by nature. It was at the same spot where Daisy, that ornery O'Leary cow, kicked over the kerosene lantern and almost destroyed us all. Now sure, that was the O'Leary barn. Sure, the fire started right there. Sure, there was a cow named Daisy. But no, she didn't start the fire. I've come before you today to say 3 words. Forgive the cow. Daisy was framed. They set her up. She got a raw deal. Do you want to know the truth? She was a smart cow. She got the heck out. It was just the biggest. Now, we've known the story was a hoax since 1893 when newspaper reporter Michael Ahern was interviewed during the World's Fair and said 2 reporters found a piece of a broken lantern and cooked the whole thing up to sell newspapers. The legend wouldn't die. People wrote folk songs about it. because it'll be a hot time in the old town tonight. Cow Daisy, also of Tacoma Street, are hereby totally exonerated of all guilt causing the Great Chicago Fire. Daisy finally got her day. But mythopoetically speaking, my friends, that fire is still determining our character today. Imagine the day after the fire with a third of the city gone, 100,000 homeless, and the builders did not wait. The builders did not wait. They walked into the midst, and they're standing in ash and they want a sign of hope. They're not going to go home until they get a sign of hope. Back from the fire to hosting the World's Fair, and it is still moving Chicago forward today. I see it when the city moves in the right direction. I see it in individual Chicagoans. I'll give you an example. A chef moves to Chicago. She opens a restaurant. Within 5 years, she's got 2 or 3. Theater kids get out of our universities, DePaul, Northwestern, Columbia, Loyola. Do they wait for some movie director to come cast them in a play or something like that? No, they're Chicago kids. They find America. I call it by its old school name. I give you the one, the only, the show. This here is now Willis Tower. It's 1,451 feet. We don't count the antenna, that's an add-on. Now you saw it close up. Construction technique, bundled tube system. You can think of the building like a bundle of sticks wrapped together for strength. It literally consists of 9 contiguous steel tubes, each 75 foot square. 2 stop at 50 floors, 2 at 66, 3 go up to 90. The final 110 stories. That's 190 South LaSalle by Philip Johnson and John Berkey. Starting out as an internet-style glassbox modernist, Philip Johnson becomes a postmodernist. Postmodernism was an arch, over-the-top reaction to the modern movement. Remember our friend Mies van der Rohe, glassbox all the way, father of American modernism? When he passed away in 1969, all the followers of Mises flooded the world with all those industrial boxes. People eventually got bored. So the pendulum swings the other way in reaction. The postmodernists went over the top. And they said, that's it, we're going to bring back decoration in a big way. And they start doing buildings where they're kind of being just frivolous and over the top, like a skyscraper about. Suffice it to say that after modernism, architects became like modern day DJs, sampling any architectural style from the past, remixing with modern materials. Look at the Board of Trade and its annex, 50 years apart. That statue is Ceres, Roman goddess of grain by John Storrs. That's 1930. Now 1980, world-class architect from Germany, Helmut Jahn, adds the annex. This is Eco Deco. So you notice you have all the hallmarks of the Art Deco of the 30s, the pyramid roof, dramatic setbacks. Puts a little sculpture over the LEDs, but it's still pretty bright at night. Now later this evening, when you see this building from a distance illuminated against the dark and wondrous Chicago American night, you may hear Chicagoans refer to it as the White Castle. Would we nickname it that because we're still longing for some Game of Thrones? The North remembers medieval age past? Nah. We call it the White Castle because it makes our stomachs rumble for sliders. You even now at Chicago and Michigan Avenue downtown. Now the building on the right, quite frankly, did not get enough attention from tour boats. I think they sat down 2 years ago and said, let us put ourselves on the map by putting ourselves on the map of the Chicago River. The red dot is this very building. Would you like to say those 3 words with me? You are here. August 1999, 2.5 hours. You know when he got to the top, there was condensation, he slipped, but he pulled
This lower area is where the trains come in
the Golden Gate
from
Bridge,
the south and
the
from the
Eiffel Tower
west.
in Paris, Kuala Lumpur Petronas Towers, Taipei 101 of Taiwan. What's he doing? He's gradually going higher. He's afraid of heights. That's why he's climbed for 40 years. He's trying to get over it. Now let me be absolutely clear. I don't want anyone trying to climb any tall buildings. No, no, no. But like Mr. Aubert, can you see and notice how they serrated the corners so you could double the number of corner offices and double the number of people got to feel very important. Everyone wants a corner office. If I may switch from the building towers and use my own arms for illustration, Houston, we have a problem. The towers are too heavy here. There's going to be a shifting of weight. You can't stop it. If you don't pay attention, here's time-lapse photography. You'll watch your building start here and end up here. The towers will tilt under their own weight. Now, why doesn't this happen? This is why you have a structural engineering firm, in this case, from Czechoslovakia at the time, Alfred Benešin Duration. The weight presses down, it straightens itself into an absolutely plumb one. Let's come back to the 150 North Riverside building coming up on our left. So many cool things. Oh, I'm just going to give a nod to this building. Come back and see me next year and we'll see how much they progressed on it. This is going to be a brand new skyscraper. I will come back to the 150 North Riverside building. Check out the fins they put on the side. Those are decorative, but it's kind of cool. It's an artistic thing because it gives the whole side of the building the look of rippling water. So here we are on the actual river, and then artistically you've got a ghost image. The whole side of the building is the river as well. I have what may seem like an odd question, but how is this building, what does it have in common with the guitars? The sway. And because of the immense sway in this particular design, you must have a heavy counter object. That is water. Can you believe it? There are 12 water tanks at the top of this building, floor blocks of 3 each, holding 160,000 gallons of water. And I tell you what, from camping in the Black Rock Desert outside of Reno, Nevada for 17 years, always having to take my own water in, I learned about the weight of water. That's a lot of ballast. So technically, this is known as inertial slosh mass dampeners. Let's all say that. Inertial slosh mass dampeners. Okay, nobody wants to say inertial slosh mass dampeners. Here's what happened. The building technology, 150 right here, and Vista Towers, Jeannie Gang's new building we looked at, we use that as well. Because you get a lot of heavy lakefront winds down there. We re-enter the main stem. What a cool building on the right, 333 West Wacker Drive, 1983, Cohn, Pedersen, and Fox. Most important thing I can tell you about this building, it is where Ferris Bueller's dad worked in the popular teen comedy Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Seriously, it's a great example of contextualism. Now, contextualism was a descendant of postmodernism. After modernism, people said, you know what, maybe a box isn't always the perfect thing. What if we finally, those green bands of black granite and green marble, and look at the support column. It's black granite, green marble, but look really close. They're not round, they're octagonal. That's a reference backwards in time and space. So you know what? We need to go back in time. Not a problem, like Doctor Who, I am a Time Lord, all on Z. Let's go back. They're elements of design. So you've got octagonal geometric corners here. So in 1983, you know, this is 1930. So all those years later, they do octagonal columns to hold up the building. They're making the comments across the river. And if you go shopping, and there are retail stores for us on the floors 1 and 2, if you look at the floor, what's going to be in the floor? Little black granite, the little green marble, which is where they got the idea for the materials. Let's give a shout out to the heads along the bank, which that comedian David Letterman claimed was the Pez Hall of Fame. Those are not Pez heads, those popular candy dispensers, my friends. 7 nice edition Skidmore Owings & Merrill 1986, 1 change bay windows for more light. And let's talk for a moment about Wacker Drive, the roadway right in front of us. Wacker Drive was the world's first bi-level roadway. It was part of Burnham's plan. If you think of the city as an organism, your roadways are all the truck deliveries, drop-off for cabs, parking, all underground. The LaSalle Wacker Building, Holyrood Route, 1930. That's Art Deco. You know why Art Deco often looks like a throne chair where you have a high portion, everything else is set back or cut lower? It was a physical phenomenon called the canyon effect. Imagine when they first start building skyscrapers, the streets are still full of horse manure from horse-drawn trolleys, smoke from the early trades, and all the detritus of the butcher shops. You could hardly breathe down here. So by 1923, he also saw industry on the water transfer to land and the river go from industrial to recreational. He left the plan of Chicago as his destiny because he couldn't be here for it, but we could do it today. A very bit of whimsical architecture from Spanish architect Ricardo Bofill, looking like a hollow Greek temple, 77 West Wacker Drive, merging classic and modern elements. One word for 55 West Wacker Drive. You know what you call that style? Brutalism. It comes from the French. Brutalism, you know what it was about? A building with a sense of gravitas, eternity, timelessness. You'll find brutalism is very popular with public institutions. 35 West Wacker Drive, home to our largest advertising firm, the Leo Burnett Company. Irish architect Kevin Roche nods to Chicago School. Building is Greek column, base, shaft, and capitol. Hey, now there's a prairie school reference worked into the top. Look at the top of the building. Look at the horizontal lines and the overhanging eaves. You can almost just take the top of that building down. If Chicago is 45 degrees and up. Can everyone see the dark green Art Deco building with the 50-foot gold cap? Looks like a giant bottle of champagne, you know? Today, that is the Hotel St. Jane, named for our first social worker in Chicago, Jane Addams. But that champagne design may have been intentional. It dates back to it dates back to the 1920s during Prohibition, when legally you couldn't pop a cork on a bottle of champagne, but it was okay to make a building look like one. The Burnham brothers designed it for Union Carbide, and many people think they gave it a champagne design on purpose. They might have been having a little fun, a little editorial comment. To the left of Hotel Wyndham, the skinniest skyscraper in Chicago, like an Apollo rocket. 75 East Wacker Drive, only 9.5-foot cross on octagonal crown. Look up there are people on the rooftop of London House, new cafe. You go through the London Guarantee and Accident building. Now, 75 East Wacker is clad with terracotta. So is Hotel St. Jane. So is it terracotta. What is it? It's fired clay. It's baked earth. It's fireproof. That's your most important consideration for a building. But let's look at it from an artist's perspective. Yeah, it's great. It's fireproof, but you can also color it. You can glaze it. Charles Biersman, if you look closely at the Wrigley building, acts like a painter. You ever watch a painter work a canvas? The key to the great painters is their shading ability. And to achieve three-dimensional shading, look closely. The tiles aren't uniform. They're baked in 6 different colors. They go from blue-white to a creamier white. Suddenly, it's just that much more interesting to the eye. That lone kayaker on our left has been here since 1673. He was actually with Father Marquette and Louis Joliet, the original, looking like a Gothic cathedral. Tribune Tower, formerly home to the Chicago Tribune newspaper, now going condominium. You could live here. Now, back in 1922, Colonel McCormick of the Trib offered $100,000, a worldwide design contest for the most beautiful office building in the world. Howells and Hook of New York went inspired by the great Gothic cathedrals of France and Belgium. French stonemasons threw those flying buttresses in 1925. And what could be more different and minimalist than below it, the brand new Apple store with a wall that's almost invisible and a roof that looks like an today is 180 degrees away from Norman Foster, 1962, designing a factory in England, old school, ponderous, heavy concrete walls. He's touring it for his mentor, Bucky Fuller of the Geodesic Dome. Bucky is all about doing more with less. To open Foster's mind up, after the tour, Bucky asked one question. Tell me, how much does your building weigh, Mr. Foster? Foster has an epiphany, becomes a minimalist right after that. NBC Tower, Echo Deco from Adrian Smith, who went on to do the tallest building in the world, inspired by 30 Rock in New York. Adrian Smith, I understand, is coming home with his new partner, Gordon Gill, and when they work on the condos of Tribune Tower, there's going to be a modernist building behind it that's going to go up to 1,421 feet right here. That's the plan so far. I'll have to wait and see how that breaks down. Coming up on the left is the Sheraton Hotel, treated to as Sullivan's beautiful ornamental ironwork. The story of Louis Sullivan, who was the most prolific author of the Chicago School, is somewhat bittersweet. He died alone in the rooming house in 1924. He had a grand partnership with Dagmar Adler. Adler and Sullivan did the auditorium building, a great building downtown. You can check out Sullivan Center. If you visit the Art Institute, you'll see they salvaged the Sullivan arch from his old stock exchange. But in those later years, after his partnership dissolved, he wasn't doing much. But his students and former friend, and old don't have much, but you go to the center of town and they have a Louis Sullivan building. Sullivan was an interesting cat. You know, he was the polaric opposite of Daniel Burnham. Whereas Burnham for the World's Fair was totally looking towards old European model, classical stuff, every building at the World's Fair has had that faux arts kind of look, except for Sullivan's transportation building. In fact, when Sullivan looked at all that kind of borrowing from the classical ideas, he and his student Frank Lloyd Wright were after a progressive new style. Sullivan has said they've looked at the World's Fair and said, oh great, this is going to set us back 50 years. But if you can check out Sullivan on your own, you won't be disappointed. The beautiful fountain on our left is called Centennial Fountain, designed up in the world, the tallest apartment complex in the world in 1968. Don't quote me on these two numbers, but I want to say 70 stories, 645 feet. It's around that. Now, Lake Point Tower was a little inspired by a glass skyscraper, a visionary sketch that Shipwright and Heinrich, the architect's teacher, Mies van der done back in Berlin. I have been talking about this building for 19 years, and I've always called it by its proper name, Lake Point Tower. You can see it has 3 wings and a little button on top, a restaurant. And because it has 3 wings on a button on top, I am now being informed by 9, 10, and 11-year-old kids on my tour that I shouldn't call it Lake Point Tower, but should call it the Fidget Spinner Building instead. Hence, I give you the Fidget Spinner. For the uninitiated, that's a popular little worry toy with 3 wings and a button on top. Now, when kids started getting off the boat repeatedly and saying, that looks like a fidget spinner, I was elated. Because you know what that meant? It meant children were having an emotional experience with a building on an architectural tour. And I think that's what we are all after. The experience of viewing art. And 1946 until 1965. Various trade shows and events during the 1980s, some wonderful music fest called Chicago Fest. I remember it like it